Hello, my wonderful artists. Today we are going to work in our sketchbooks. This will be your sketchbook assignment that will be due probably in about a week. I first want to say that this was my kind of creation based on a simple experiment that I was doing with monochromatic colors. So first, let's talk about that. Monochromatic means I'm using tints or shades of one single color. So in this, I used red or an orangey red. It seems to be that maybe I mixed it up a couple of times, but I stuck with mostly reds. And then I added either whites or blacks to add a little bit of variation and depth to this piece. So I made the one and only Ladybug crew. This is the band. These are the fans. So I just kind of gave them speech bubbles and kind of made it a crazy fun little thing. You can see the drummer and the bass player and the singer, and I don't know what that guy's doing. Maybe broadcasting. And then all of the fans over here kind of had something to say. Just kind of a fun and crazy way to mix up learning about watercolors and monochromatic and things like that. Now, if you don't like ladybugs and you don't want to go that direction, you can create any kind of critter that you would like, but your goal is to make sure that they are monochromatic. So please take the time to figure out what color you want to use before you begin. Now that I've kind of shown you some examples and you've seen two different kind of variations of ways to take this, you could make your little critters creepy crawlies and, do them more buggish than just ladybugs. We're going to first talk about how to get our color on our page. So I'm actually going to have to move this so you guys can see my whole page while I'm working here. Let me rearrange for a minute. Those guys out of the way. All right, so make sure you have a water container with clean water, which mine is not, but we're going to work with it anyway. Oh, I got glitter everywhere. That's from our previous project. It's just everywhere. It's okay. Get a paper towel. Make sure you have something to kind of dry your brush off on. Make sure that it's clean, whatnot. Again, starting with wet watercolors, you want to make sure that you have a little bit of water in each of those. Wells, which is what they're called, the little pans of watercolor, called wells. Anyway, so I think I'm going to go, I'm going to make my bugs, let's think here. Do I like that color? It's kind of boring. I don't want green bugs. I want orange bugs. All right, so I'm just going to make sure that I have enough of the orange color I want. So if I'm using orange straight from the pan and I put it on and it's really thick like that, there's not enough water in it. So that can happen when you kind of drop in your water, when they get really wet and they kind of end up getting kind of cakey and then they stick to your brush really well, which is a nice thing, but at the same time, it is really a lot of color in one space. So as you can see, I spread it out all over the page, and I probably still have enough on my brush to kind of do some over here. That's how thin it should look, not as thick as you were seeing before. So I'm just going to kind of spread it around, and then I'm going to get some more for this side. And I'm going right over that little perforation. Sometimes I even like to get in between so that the pages look complete, like a complete two-page spread rather than kind of half-heartedly done. And you can spread your paint around any direction, way you want. Really get into it. Okay. All right. Now, since it's monochromatic, we need to mix orange with white or orange with black. So I'm going to get my black wet here, And since I already have orange on the page, what I can do is just drop in some black spots, or maybe they're dashes. And I'm going to let this painting kind of tell me where my critters end up being. Just experimenting with the paint. I'm going to add some thicker orange, maybe make some lines. This is where you can kind of practice how to get thin lines with your paintbrush versus thick lines with your paintbrush. You can let the background dry, then you won't have this bleeding kind of effect. If you like the bleeding effect, then you definitely want to make sure that your background is still wet when you're doing this. I kind of like moving through the process fairly quickly and just kind of playing while I'm working rather than trying to be too particular about it. So now that I kind of have some colors on there, I'm going to let it dry and then I will be right back. Okay, we're back. My painting is completely dry. My hands are not. I changed out my water so that my water was nice and clean now. That definitely is a huge key factor in whether you end up with kind of a messy brownish color or you kind of end up with the colors you were going for. I've also cleaned out 2 spots on my palette so that I can now mix. Let me get my puddle going here. Because I have to reach across my sketchbook, it kind of drips sometimes on it, but that's okay. Then I can mix just a tiny bit of black. I mean, a teensy tiny bit will give you a really strong dark orange color. Kind of turns it into this burnt orange color. Another thing you'll notice as this dries is that you kind of end up with, pages that warp. So simply adding a little binder clip or a paper clip to the edges really does help hold everything down. You can do them on all 4 corners or just the top ones. It's really up to you how you do that. I like to put them on the corners and then kind of move them from top to bottom as I need them. Or if my page is really curled, then definitely giving it the chance to kind of smush back together by closing it and putting something heavy on top really helps. So, all right. So we have this brownish orange color, and I'm just going to create some blobs of color here. Keep my brush and my watercolor really well mixed, and just get some big blobs of color on. And I don't even know if that is dark enough, but you can, I guess you can see it on screen. And I'm just gonna, I'm not worried about my circles being perfect. I'm not worried about my circles having little splotches that kind of stick out or anything like that. Just kind of going with the flow. Some of them bigger, some of them smaller. While you're doing this part, it's a great time to kind of think about what you're going to change these blobs into. All right. So now that I have my orange and black, I'm going to put a blob of orange, and then I'm going to take my big brush and drip some water in there. Again, good puddle action going. And then there is very little wiggle room for adding white to this. You guys don't have white. I do, but what I'm going to show you is actually adding, I was going to do white and then I realized you guys don't have it. Let's add some yellow. So we're just going to brighten this up, not with a tint, but with some yellow. So just kind of, you're going to need a lot of yellow to change that orange. So you want it to be different than what's already in your watercolor pan. So you really need to get that yellow going and get a lot of it mixed in before you kind of get the change that you want to happen. Oh, my blue pulled over from the other side, which is going to make that turn green. So I'm going to clean that up real quick. See if we can't get some more of this yellow. Kind of change this. Okay, now it's spilled into my black and orange mix, but that's okay. I'm just going to clean my brush out here, make sure it's not just yellow. And now I kind of have a yellowy orange. So I'm going to add some circles of yellowy orange. And they don't have to be circles. They could be ovals. They could be squares. They could be triangles. It's really up to you. And that's where starting to think about what you're going to change these shapes into will help you. So my idea started from the Journal Sparks book that I showed you last year. So many of you saw some pages out of that where you take tints and shades of a color, create this backgrounds kind of look, and then you're going to draw over top of it. And you can draw over top with anything you want. And I'm even going to add some of these lighter dots on top of my darker circles. This one's still wet, so it'll probably bleed. And then I'm going to go straight into my orange and add even more. So you can really see that straight orange. And I'm not watering this down, so it's a really thick color on my paintbrush so that it really shows up in those dots that I put down. Unlike how we did the background. It's kind of changing those methods up really helps you kind of experiment and play and kind of understand how the watercolors work. Also letting them dry on their own versus rushing it or using a blow dryer to do it, which is what I had to do to make this video in such a short amount of time, but it doesn't have to happen that way. And maybe one has a lot of spots. Maybe he had a spot explosion. Okay. I think I'm pretty happy with where this is going and the direction it's headed in. This one's really blending together. So if you like that look and you're not seeing it on some of your other ones, take a clean, wet brush, dip it in your water, and then just drop some water droplets on it. You could even go in and add straight black to these. There's really no end to this. You could go on and on forever. I'm just going to add some black dots here and there. Make sure my brush is a little wetter. Black can be really strong if you want it to be, or it can be subtle like it was in the background over here, depending on whether it's wet or not. So if it's just straight black on a dry surface, it's going to look different than if it's dark black in a puddle. So they'll dry a little grayer or a little more bluish looking than black. So I'm going to dry this again, and then I'm going to show you how I will transform these dots into, I don't know, some sort of creative thing. It doesn't have to be real, and I'm going to look back at my resources and talk more about that in the next video. I hope you guys are having fun. Enjoy this. Add lots to it. Make it your own. Experiment. If you need to use a couple of pages, if you messed up on the first one, please feel free to let it dry, turn the page, and start over. Okay, this is where I pulled my idea from. We are in the Journal Sparks book by Emily Newberger. So we were creating blobs, and we're going to transform those shapeless blobs into quirky characters and things. Their personalities will instantly shine through as soon as they're dry, which I'm almost there. So we've already done the painting portion. Once they're dry, you're going to use a fine point pen of some sort to turn them into objects, animals, or people. What will your blobs turn into? That is the question. Blobs can become socks, radios, cars, rocket ships, animals, trees, planets, tools, food, musical instruments, a holiday meal, boats, clothing, farm equipment, city buildings, books, pieces of mail, art supplies, Halloween costumes, or anything. So in this example, they're mostly flowers and birds. Well, a bird. One bird. Lots of flowers and patterns and things like that happening there. So if you remember back, I've made blobs a couple of times now. One turned into a bunch of creepy crawlies, and that says bug friend over there. That's what my son called it, bug friend. And then I had a random flower drawing. It had nothing to do with anything. But I turned these blobs into my ladybug crew. So they kind of turned into a ladybug rock band. And this is something I did a while ago. So depending on what you're listening to or reading or thinking about or what you've experienced can really affect how you go about changing these blobs into something a little different. So this one kind of looked like a lemon that got turned into some sort of critter. One thing I want to point out here at the bottom, it says if you're making a character, experiment with different eyebrow angles, mouth shapes, and eye sizes, and you'll see just a tiny tweak can make a very different facial expression. Play with ears, noses, feathers, spikes, lips, hats, knees, jewelry, makeup, hairstyles, mustaches and beards, and so on. So you can really take those little blobs and turn them into different kinds of birds or people or whatever you really want them to become. Mine is not quite dry yet, but we're just going to try and work over top of it anyway. So I'm going to find a pen that will show up really well, and you guys will easily be able to see it. Give me a second here. I gotta dig through my supplies. I'm all dried out. Everything, I think, is pretty dry. Enough to where I'm not going to smear it anyway. So I can move my watercolors out of the way and give you kind of a better view here of what I'm going to do. So I think I'm just going to kind of make these into faces, just random faces. So I'm just going to add eyebrows, and I'm going to use kind of the blobs that are there to help me make different kinds of hair or whatever I want. Yours could be a ladybug band. It does not have to be a person. But I liked the shape of these as the eyes. So I just grabbed a black marker. It's not super great because I kind of ruined the tip of it, but I've added eyes. I can make like the pupils a little darker. I added eyebrows, a nose, and this kind of upside down sad face mouth. Now I'm not going to color it in. I'm just going to kind of leave it like that. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to make another one. And I'm going to give him a long nose. And I just kind of make things out of nothing. And they don't have to be perfect. And that's kind of the best part about this, is there's really no wrong answer. So this can be like a cheek highlight. Let's think about the hair. Maybe some bangs, some longer hair. And I'm not being too precious with this. It's just kind of going with the flow and letting things kind of show up in whatever way my mind wants to interpret them. And so as I work, I just kind of fill in the blobs and find out what I see there. Where I can make a couple of eyes is usually where I start. If I'm not seeing a nose, I can always add in a nose. And then I look for a blob that kind of looks like a mouth. I made a little tongue there. And maybe you can add lips, like she's singing low. And maybe she is looking over there while she's singing. Sometimes you don't even need to outline things or add eyelashes to them, but I'm going to give her big fluffy hair. And I'm just going to kind of let this one overlap with that one a little bit where the hair touches, and that's totally fine too. Just like so. And you just kind of keep working on all of your blobs and figuring out what it is you want them to be. Maybe some of them are people and maybe some of them are not people. Maybe this guy's got a little beard action going. And his hair on top of his head matches. Long ears. You don't always have to outline them either. I feel like with the yellow and orange, it kind of can be hard to see on the paper. You guys are seeing it pretty well on your computer screens, but it might not be as easy to see in person. These little black blobs are definitely helping me make some eyes. But I'm just going to kind of give this one a goofy look. He's cross-eyed and smiling at you. And so you just keep working until your page is finished. All of your blobs that you've created should have something on them. I'm not seeing faces immediately on these, but I'm going to take a little break, step back, and come back to it and see if I can't finish it. So far, I'm really loving these characters I've created. I think they're great fun and really add some excitement to this page of my sketchbook. I hope you guys have fun with this as well and something creative comes of it. And you learn something about how to mix your paints, how to drop in colors, wet on wet, dry on wet, and using those monochromatic colors to your advantage. I hope you have fun. If you need anything or need a still image of a finished product or even my examples, I'm happy to send that to you. Thanks so much.